Welcome back, guys. Today's gonna be a big one. We've got a lot of hair to work with, so let's get right into it. Now, the first thing I like to do with these types of haircuts is start in the back. The reason why is simple. When I'm doing scissor work, I like to work from point A to point B type of thing. In other words, I build one reference, then connect it to another, and so on. So, it'll give me clear guides and keeps everything consistent no matter where I'm cutting. So to start off, I section from the highest point of the head, what's called the apex, and bring that section down just behind the ear on both sides. Once that's done, I separate the sides from the top and the back, connecting the section from the back into the recession along the parietal ridge, or in other words, where the head begins to round on the sides. What this creates is a squared section at the top, one of the most common setups because it follows right where the head pretty much rounds off. So every section is going through the round areas of the head, and that's what's important because we're working on a curved surface, right? On a round surface. The head is round. So if you've ever wondered why we section the way we do, it's to simplify something complex. You're basically breaking a rounded surface into smaller, more manageable areas. This is what'll keep you from getting lost and helps maintain balance throughout the cut. So remember, the hair hangs differently at every point on the head, so ignoring your sections is one of the fastest ways to end up with uneven results. Alright, so to start off in the back, this is where I'm setting my first reference. Since I'm going for more of a creative haircut, my client likes that dark V shape in the back. And because this is a longer, slick back style, I need to build that up into more weight as I move upward. Now, to save some time, I am doing this part with my clipper. A lot of people you'll see doing it with their shears, and that's fine, but for me, this gets me there quicker and cleaner. Later on, I do go back in with my trimmer to detail the line and sharpen everything up. From here, the idea is simple. I'm using the hair that hangs down to my guideline as my first reference. I'll pick that up and grab a little bit of the hair from the occipital area above it. Using the previously cut hair as a guide, I create a new slightly shorter length moving upward. So essentially I'm elevating the hair, and lifting it higher will actually remove a little bit of weight at the bottom while creating a shorter length in that 90-degree area where the hair starts to stick straight out. So that's how you keep that bottom dark while still creating movement through the middle. So the shape goes pretty much from long at the bottom of the V to slightly shorter through the occipital area, then gradually longer again as I build towards the crown. That's the graduation, that short to long transition. And I am taking diagonal sections through this process. And again, at the lower part, I am keeping my elevation high. You can think my sections, pulling the hair out towards my chin. As I work upward towards the crown, I start following the head shape more, pointing my sections parallel to the head shape. So you can think of it like pulling the hair towards my stomach or my belly. And now once I reach the crown, I lower my elevation to form that weight line. That's the area that gives the cut its flow and natural movement when the hair falls back down. Now, if you pay attention to the crown area, you'll start to notice how the hair naturally falls into a slight V shape. That's where you can actually see the weight line come to life. So now, again, at the very bottom, that V section is left longer. That's what keeps it dark and full. As you move up towards the occipital area, the hair gets slightly shorter and tighter, which helps control the shape. Then from the crown down, all that length starts to fall back towards the occipital area, building that weight line we talked about. That weight line is what gives the haircut its structure. It's what will allow the hair to move and flow naturally once it's styled. Now I'm going to start connecting the length from the back to the sides. The goal here is to carry that weight line I built in the back and pretty much transfer it into the sides. So what I do is grab a bit of hair from the back and a bit from the side and use that previous section as my guide. One key thing to remember, when you're combing and grabbing the hair to cut, you'll know you're holding it at the right elevation if your guideline looks clean and defined. If it looks stacked or uneven, you're probably holding too low or too high. You want that clear, consistent cutting line all the way through. As I work forward, my clients got thicker hair on the sides, especially around the temple area, so I'm careful not to take too much length off. I want to keep enough length and weight so the hair kind of falls around, above the ear in that area. That's pretty much where you can see I placed my weight line here on the side. So again, you'll see right now when the hair falls, I show you with my comb, you can see clearly my weight line is right here. Now moving into the graduation on the sides, in the temple area, I'm going to start cutting with my fingers right on the scalp because I'll be tapering that area later. Now the next section, I am going to pretty much do the same thing, but just slightly over direct it down to the previous to kind of blend that length into the shorter length that I created below. Now this is the one thing that helped me understand graduation better. When I grab the hair from the very top of that section, this is where you have to really consider how the head rounds. The parietal ridge area is key, so I pull that hair down towards my existing weight line to not ruin the shape that I'm trying to create. So when I'm working up through this area, I'm pulling the hair down towards my existing weight line to keep the structure intact. That's what connects everything from short to long. The edge of my fingers show me exactly where that length sits, basically referencing the length I created earlier. That's what I use to maintain my graduation. So again, as I move up, I make sure that I'm lowering that hair down towards that weight line to preserve the shape and the flow. Then once I'm only working on the side area away from the ridge, away from the parietal ridge, I shift to holding the hair at a 90-degree angle. At that point, I'm not building weight anymore, I'm just refining the length. As I work towards the back, you'll start to see how that side just connects perfectly into the shape that we built. Now, here are a few tips that really helped me with graduation. First, always remember the section goes where the hair flows. If I'm taking diagonal sections, I'm also combing the hair back diagonally in the same direction I want it to flow. It just makes more sense and it makes sectioning a lot easier. Another big one, keep the hair wet, not just damp, but wet enough so it stays controlled. That alone makes a huge difference with sectioning and keeps you from getting frustrated or losing track of where you are. And lastly, have patience. These types of haircuts take time. Before you get fast and efficient, you have to get precise. The speed comes after you really understand the fundamentals and take your time working through each section. And I do want to say, if a lot of this stuff does not make sense, we actually have free videos explaining head shapes, intro to head shapes, which are a part of the fundamentals, how to grab the hair, how to section, and so much more, all for free. So if this is something that interests you, I'll leave the link down below in the description. It'll have you make a free school account, and then you'll have access to a community of over 10,000 barbers and so many educational videos for free. Yes, I'm serious. Alright, now moving on to the top. First thing I'm going to do is comb all the hair back. One trick I like to use to find where the hair naturally splits is to grab a bit from the front, push it forward, and you'll notice how with most hair textures, it'll naturally separate right down the middle. That's your natural split, and it makes finding your section way easier. Once I've split the top down the middle, I'm ready to start connecting the top length into the sides. Now, my goal here is to blend that top length into the weight line I created all the way around the head, from the back into the sides. But I don't want it to feel too heavy, so as I start cutting from the back, I'm going to raise my elevation just slightly, pulling the hair up around chest level. That little bit of elevation softens the weight line, so it's still dark and full but not too bulky. The top length will sit just slightly above that weight line, and I only do this through the back and up to about the ear area. Now once I start working towards the front, I begin lowering my elevation because I want to preserve length and keep that natural heaviness in the front. I cut less in that area so that when the hair falls, it has enough weight to flow into that weight line on the sides. But if you notice, I did pay attention to how the hair, wanted to sit naturally, so I let it fall, pushed it around, and just saw where it moves best. And I did set my guide around that lower eyebrow level and at a lower elevation. But you can see pretty much everything, how it all connects, into that existing weight line on the sides. So literally from the crown to the sides to the front, all one just continuous movement. And I'll repeat the same process on the other side. So now here is a very important part. I'm actually just making sure that both sides are going to be even lengths. That way I can connect everything appropriately and both sides are pretty much the same length. And I'll actually use this as a reference when I cut the top and connect the back to the top. You'll see what I mean shortly. Now, to complete the top, I've already created that middle section, and at this point I'm just connecting the length from the back into the top. As I lift the hair in the crown area, I'm keeping in mind where I originally sectioned when I split the top from the back. That's where I choose my length, and I'm basically using that shortest, longest point from the back as my guide. And like I mentioned earlier, this is why I always work from point A to point B. It keeps things clean and structured. The front is already established from when I checked for evenness on both sides. So now all I'm doing is connecting that shorter length in the back from the crown, building that square shape as I move towards the front, and connecting it into that established front length. Now to finish off the shape on top, I'm just cleaning everything up. When I hold the hair horizontally, you'll notice a few peaks or uneven areas. Not so much on the sides, but right across the top. All I'm doing here is evening everything out to the guide I created earlier, right through the middle. And I start right from where I sectioned in the back around the crown area and work my way forward using horizontal sections, about 1/2 inch to 1 inch wide. With each section, I'm just removing those longer peaks and connecting everything together to keep that square shape consistent across the top. And as I do this, I am holding the hair straight up vertically. That keeps the shape balanced and ensures the whole top blends smoothly into the rim. And I am holding the hair straight up vertically. That'll keep the shape balanced throughout the whole top. And I do like combing the hair back, the hair that I previously already cut, just to keep, my workspace pretty cleaned up. And I do want to just share something real quick, especially for those of you watching and maybe feel overwhelmed by seeing all this crazy scissors stuff online. A lot of this is not, and I'm not knocking it, but most of it is done just to stand out. The more I've learned, the more I've been around other barbers, educators, and stylists, the more I've realized it all comes back just to the fundamentals. That's the real foundation. And honestly, you don't need to be doing every advanced or trendy haircut you see. Don't overwhelm yourself. If you're not getting these kinds of clients, it's perfectly fine. I didn't even start doing these haircuts like this until I was charging over 100. Before that, most of my clients are just fades, tapers, and simple trims, and they still are actually. I just focus on learning to cut the top correctly, practicing crops, slick backs, and mullets. That's it. And even now, I don't stress about all the extra stuff because, that's pretty much the majority of my clientele. If it's not my specialty or it doesn't fit my clientele, I'm not going to force it. At the end of the day, to each their own. You can reach a really high level in this industry by mastering the basics and building from there. You don't have to know it all to be great. But after applying some sea salt spray, I went ahead and blow dried everything back. When I'm working on the top, I like to use my flat brush to scoop the hair up and back slowly while following it with the blow dryer using a concentrator. Now, with this type of hair, you really have to take your time. It holds a lot of moisture and takes a while to dry completely. So I don't rush the process. I take my time. Once everything was dry and flowing back nicely, we were ready to move on and start fading out the taper. Now, before starting the taper, I like to first soften and solidify my ceiling, or the roof of the taper, basically where the fade is going to transition up towards. I usually establish that area using my thinning shears. Now, since this is a small taper in the temple area and I'm keeping it low, I like to move efficiently. These types of haircuts already take time, especially with all the scissor work, so I want to show you how you can cut that time down and still get a clean result by just freehanding the taper. What I did here was I went in with my clipper with the lever closed and just freehanded that initial shape. The angle of your blade pretty much becomes your guard. So as I flick out, I'm controlling exactly how high I want that taper to sit. So towards the bottom, my clipper blade was angled inward more. As I reach the top, I am just angling that blade out a bit more, and hence just creating a nice clean little fade. After that, I cleaned up the C cup starting from the top down using the corner of my trimmer with light gentle flicks. This helps carve out a clean natural C shape without digging in too deep. Once that was in place, I simply connected my fade into the bulk I already established with my thinning shears, and honestly in about 3 to 5 minutes you can have a nice smooth taper without spending so much time on it, or using all these guards. But you don't always have to use the guards. Freehanding works great once you have the control and the confidence to do so. But if you're just starting out, take your time and work up to it. After that, I just cleaned up the area behind the ear, shaping it into a nice round curve that flows into that little peak that's in the back, just using the corner of the blade for precision. Then I went back to refine the V in the back, having him look up and then down to make sure no hairs were overlapping, whenever he'd move his head around. So don't overlook this, if you don't check those angles, have him move his head around, have your client move their head around. Little hairs can stick out once the client moves, so take a minute to make sure that line is sharp, balanced, and stays clean no matter how the head moves. Now after this, I applied some clay to the hair before going back in with the blow dryer on a cool setting. Blowing cold air helps seal the cuticle, lock in moisture, and also reduces frizz and kind of brings out that shine for a clean, polished finish. So once everything was set, I locked in that style with a bit of hairspray while using a wide tooth comb to bring that shape to life and just give it a nice final touch. And that's pretty much it, guys. A simple, clean, slick back pompadour type of style. I'd say it gives off like a Christian Bale kind of look. Peace.